Hi everyone, welcome to the session on women's reproductive health. And it's such a great pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker in today's session, and that is Dr. Bushra Gul. We are so honored to have her with us. Dr. Gul is a highly esteemed obstetrician and gynecologist, and she brings over 22 years of extensive experience to our session. Dr. Gul has earned her MBBS from a renowned Karachi Medical College, and further, she has honed her expertise with a fellowship in obstetrics and gynecology from the College of Physicians and Surgeons. She is a dedicated to the patient education and empowerment, and most importantly, the way she presents herself as a compassionate doctor, not just a doctor, but yes, with a lot of compassion that she brings in. She has been a cornerstone of her practice in ensuring that her patients are very well informed and they are actively involved in their healthcare decisions. Dr. Gul owns a comprehensive, extensive spans, and she indulges in a wide range of areas which are related to high-risk pregnancies, adolescents' health, menopause management, infertility, and whatnot. Her deep understanding and compassionate approach makes her a trusted advisor and caregiver for many people. In today's session, she is going to explore the crucial aspects of women's reproductive health across different stages of life. We're not just going to stick with one thing, but it's going to span over from adolescence to the menopause. And it is going to help us not just personally, but understanding, women around us. It can be our sisters, our mothers, our friends, and everybody. She will shed the light of common gynecologic conditions like PCOS, endometriosis, ovarian cysts, and so many others. So we are open to, shower our questions to her because she's going to answer them all. And additionally, she will emphasize the impact of these conditions on our daily life as well. The way we, lead our eating habits, the way we are going to progress with our daily life situations and everything. And what can be the preventive measures involved in all these. And also related to the cervical cancer, which we are not very well informed of. So please join everybody in meeting Dr. Bushra Gul, and she's going to guide us through all these stages of life with all the essential and enlightening discussion on the proactive health management for women. Hi, doctor.
How are
Can
you?
you hear
I'm
us?
so excited and I love your intro. And honestly, I feel honored and I'm myself excited to go through this journey of the topic women reproductive health, which actually matters for all of us, even for the boys, if they have moms, sisters, for everyone, it is important. Yeah, I can start sharing my presentation. Is it okay?
Sure,
I
doctor.
can
And
share. Yeah.
everybody, please drop in your questions if you have in between the session in the comment boxes. Thank you.
So here we go. So I'm Dr. Bushra, as being introduced already, and thank you for the warm introduction. And women reproductive health is really a topic which is so close to our heart, and it matters to us. And I'm really delighted to have a journey with you through this subject. So, what is reproductive health? Reproductive health is not merely the absence of disease, it's complete mental, social, physical well being. So, why it's important? Like when we talk about health, is it important? Yes. Uh, it reflects the broader aspect of the health during all stages of life, and it is affected by health, complete overall health, and it is crucial to understand it if anyone believes in quality of life and mental health. For women, the reproductive health is very dynamic. It has stages, and stages are adolescent, reproductive age, and menopausal women. So, adolescent is a time when we take care of adolescent health. This sets a stage for healthy adults. So, they will transform to healthy adults which can have healthy reproductive age. And a healthy reproductive age also translates into healthy pregnancies and healthy offsprings. And since nowadays the life expectancy of the women is increased, so more women we find in menopause and longer is this time. So especially want to address the menopausal women as well. So adolescent, it is really less addressed thing. The girl just grow and everybody thinks that they will understand themselves from the mother, from the surrounding. But really there are things that we have to explain to them. Body literacy, when they grow up, puberty hits, there are changes, they're confused, sometimes they lose confidence. This is a very critical time that they might lose confidence. So we have to help them understand their body so they can take care of their bodies. And it's also should include that we should teach them what is puberty, and we should give them the positive self-image about whatever the changes are happening, and we should encourage them healthy habits. And we should teach them how to set boundaries, so it will build confidence in them and it will support their overall well-being. Then HPV vaccination, human papillomavirus is quite a common disease, and we are lucky to living in an era where HPV vaccination, not for all HPV virus strains, but the one especially which are really more high risk to cause cancers are available. So we should make sure if teenage take vaccination before the age of 15, it's just 2 doses and the protection is far better. So it's not just will be preventing cancers, so it will be a bigger step towards decreasing the prevalence of disease overall in the community. Then comes the menstrual health. It used to be a taboo topic. In the past, people were not talking about, hello, yeah. So it was a taboo topic in the past. Mothers were not discussing with their daughters. So we have to provide them not just education, we have to provide them resources to deal with the periods more effectively. And the most important thing is to break the stigma surrounding the menstruation. We should foster a safe space and supportive environment, and so they can talk about the periods openly, and this should allow them to deal with their periods with dignity and self-confidence. Recently, I had a patient, and I was surprised when she told me a story how she was victim of abuse, and she wasn't even knowing the boundary and the moment when it changed into abuse, because it was by a relative, and she didn't knew what was the point when it was just turned into abuse. So we as a parents, or we as anyone around us, we have to prevent that abuse. So what are the key strategies to prevent the abuse? We have to encourage them to recognize assertive behavior and identify red flag signs in relationship. We have to teach them to set boundaries, and we have to ask them to prioritize online safety. And beside that, we have to teach them the safe places and identify trusted adults that will empower them to protect themselves and seek help when needed. Then mental health, of course, like when girls grow, because of her hormones, they can have mood changes, and they can have emotional disturbances can happen due to hormonal changes. So what we have to do, we have to support them there also. So when they grow up as healthy, well-adjusted adults. Then reproductive age, it is very important. It also shouldn't be taken just like that, that women will know everything by themselves. Fertility awareness, let women know when they are fertile so they can avoid or achieve pregnancy by that knowledge. Then we have to ensure that before they become pregnant, they should know the healthy lifestyle, and they should know the whatever has to be done before getting pregnant, like folic acid, addressing their chronic diseases, ensuring that they are vaccinated for the diseases which are important during pregnancy. And pregnancy and childbirth is very important time, because if they know what has to be done during pregnancy and childbirth, they will end up in healthy outcome. Contraception knowledge let women decide when to plan pregnancy and how to space pregnancy. Pap smear, very important, and it is one of the signs success that we can prevent cervical cancer by having regular pap smear screening. Menopause, which has been really neglected topic. Women silently suffers from the symptoms like hot flashes, sleep disturbances. So we, by education, we can make sure that they know how to deal their symptoms. And then there are two critical things during menopause: the bone health, which can be compromised, and the cardiovascular health. So we can make sure that they are taking enough calcium, and they are doing the weight bearing exercise to make their bones strong and avoid osteoporosis. Cardiovascular health, once a woman is menopausal, her heart attack risk equals men. So endurance exercises and having a lifestyle modification in terms of diet can help them mitigate this risk. Then there's a role of proactive health. So there's a preventive health, there's a proactive health. There's an old adage which says that prevention is better than cure. So it holds true, especially in the realm of healthcare. It not just that you will be preventing diseases. If you diagnose those diseases in later stage, like cervical cancer or the breast cancer, the cost is very, very high. And it's not just economic cost, it is mental, social, all kind of cost. So proactive healthcare is something beyond prevention. It's about having the optimum health and the quality of life. So what does it mean? We need to have the regular consults to the doctor even when you're not sick. So you will have a platform to discuss a lot of things. And there are interventions even when you're not sick you can do to make your quality of life or health better, like pap smear for screening, cervical cancer, pelvic exam to know nothing is wrong happening with your uterus or ovaries, or STI screening if you think there's a risk, vaccination from the cervical HPV, which can cause cervical cancer, vaccination against rubella. If that happens during pregnancy, that has much more impact on the baby. Preconception care, a lot of people, they don't have concept that there is a preconception care, and there are certain diseases which can be protected by having preconception care. Then of course, like rather ending up in the hospital with saying that this is unplanned child and you want to go for the abortion services, it's better to have the family planning by knowing your fertility and controlling it. Lifestyle modifications, there's so much being done these days about knowing the diet and what kind of exercise, how much. So by having regular consults, you can have all the issues addressed, and you will have a platform to discuss everything. Last but not the least, mental health support, which is being ignored for very long time. It's time to address this. So I will encourage all of you to have regular consult to the doctor and find an expert where you can discuss all of the issues and have more knowledge about having the quality of life. We cannot pass the whole presentation on the reproductive health without talking about these four common gynecological conditions, which are ovarian cyst, polycystic ovarian disease, endometriosis, and the fibroid. They're quite common, and if you know what they how they present, what they can cause, probably you will be able to identify those signs and may turn up to the doctor earlier for diagnosis and better management. Polycystic ovarian disease. So what is polycystic ovarian disease? Polycystic ovarian disease is it's a very common hormonal disorder, and it is quite prevalent. It is almost 10% of the women of reproductive age are suffering from polycystic ovarian disease. What it's not just hormonal disorders, like it presents with the can present with the subfertility, with acne, hirsutism, weight gain. And that's not it. It has emotional toll. It can cause fatigue, depression, and there are more diseases which put women at risk when they are long-standing polycystic ovarian syndrome. So how the diagnosis is done? Every woman who has sonographic or ultrasound appearance of the polycystic ovary is not polycystic ovary. There has to be signs. So if your doctor or someone being told that your ultrasound shows polycystic ovary, it doesn't equate to the disease. Disease happens when somebody completes the criteria. We call it Rotterdam criteria. So there are more to it. Two out of like just having sonographic appearance, don't be alarmed. You might be at risk of having PCO in the future, but that doesn't equate to having PCO. So what is etiology? It could be environmental or genetic, but it is not completely understood. And it could be both together, like people might be having the genetic risk of having PCO, and then the environment, like having junk food, sedentary lifestyle, no exercise, may put them more at risk of PCO. So treatment options are lifestyle modifications. Yes, your doctor will tell you about the diet modification. So for that purpose, when I say the lifestyle modification, it's not a fad diet having for few months or few weeks. It's the lifestyle. So for that reason, you need to understand diet very properly, and you need to know when things are served on your dining table, what which one to take and what's the difference between taking this food and that food. So understanding diet is really important these days. Exercise, yes, we cannot deny the role of exercise and what kind of exercise we'll be talking further. So medications, yeah, there are medications, metformin, which originally used to be a diabetic medication, but it has a role in polycystic ovarian disease. There could be hormones, and the inositol also have a role. It's a special supplement for ovaries. So long-term complication, if somebody has a long-standing polycystic ovarian syndrome or disease, they are at risk of having cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, cardiac disease, fatigue, depression, obstructive sleep apnea. So it's not that you know that you have polycystic ovarian disease or syndrome. You have to work closely with your healthcare provider, and there has to be regular consults, and medicine is also evolving very fast. So, every sometimes you get to know new things coming. Endometriosis. Endometriosis is also very common. 1 in 10 women might be suffering from endometriosis. And what bad that it is diagnosed very late. We keep on rejecting the pain symptoms saying that pain with the period is a very common thing and it's a normal thing. So, but sometimes at some point people might be having endometriosis also. So what endometriosis is your uterus has an inner lining of the uterus, the most inner lining, which shades and break down with every period. But sometimes this lining migrates into other places like inside the uterus or inside the tummy, inside the ovary. Since it is not a natural place for them, it's this misplaced location uh, make them, but their behavior is the same to break down with every period. So when they break down in other places and there is no escape to that blood, it causes inflammatory response, and that inflammatory response and that blood, it predisposes women to adhesions or scar tissue formation. Because of this scar tissue formation and inflammation, women feels pain. And it not just that pain, women has far more impact on daily life, being absent from their work, from their school, and it can also strain the their personal relationship, which can cause emotional toll. And yes, it causes subfertility too. So what are the treatment approaches? They are individualized depending on the symptoms women might be suffering and what they want to do. Like if they're coming for subfertility, the treatment approach is totally different. If they want to go for only pain management, then it will be mainly pain relief medications. Surgery is an option. It is advancing, but it is still not the best. Laparoscopic surgery is quite prevalent around, but it is not the cure. It is not that you just like ovarian cyst did the surgery, removed the ovarian cyst and it's gone. No, disease stays there. So again, with endometriosis, people have to work closely with their healthcare provider long term. Alternative therapies. Recently, I went to a very international and famous conference, and in that, there were two researchers who were talking about the diet, and they said if these women take Mediterranean diet, in a week time, this is a big claim, honestly, their symptoms of pain decreased. And maybe in future, we'll be finding more alternative therapies. Ovarian cyst. So what is ovarian cyst? It is just a fluid-filled sac, if that is called cyst. When it's in ovary, that is called ovarian cyst. Most of the time, ovarian cyst is benign, nothing has to be done, and it resolves on their own. And many a time people have no symptoms, nothing, but sometimes they have pain symptoms, heaviness, but very rarely they can cause acute pain emergencies which might need urgent surgeries, and those conditions are torted or twisted ovarian cyst or burst ovarian cyst. How to do the diagnosis? If you get irregular periods or heaviness symptoms or back pain or any pain symptoms, you should go to the hospital to get a pelvic scan done. They may diagnose, but not to be alarmed because most of the ovarian cysts, they do resolve on their own. So management, again, if it's a benign cyst, your doctor will ask you to have the watchful waiting, and if they find some solid component like dermoid cyst or some cyst which needs surgery, they will explain to you about the having surgery. And when it is acute pain syndrome caused by twisted ovarian cyst or the burst ovarian cyst, then it's an urgent surgery needs to be done. Fibroids, very, very common. They are muscle growth and muscle and fibrous tissue in the middle layer of your uterus. It just grows, and it's very common. Every third woman has fibroid, but just because we have ultrasound machines, very common, and they're very sensitive, most of the people, they know that they have fibroids. They are mostly asymptomatic. They don't cause any problem. Only when they grow in size, they cause problem like heaviness, frequent urination, and back pain or constipation. They can become significant during pregnancy because pregnancy hormone can make them grow bigger and faster, and there could be acute emergencies in pregnancies. But even with fibroid having pregnancy, nothing to be alarmed if you're working closely with your healthcare provider. Diagnosis, pelvic exam may suggest that somebody has fibroid, but that is only confirmed after having an ultrasound. And even after ultrasound, sometimes we do MRI to know the exact size, extent of the fibroid. Management, if you have a smaller fibroid, nothing to be done, just to observe if it's not increasing in size. But if it is a very big size affecting your life, making pain symptoms, frequent urination, or constipation, or heavy periods, then you might have to address, and you might have to have surgically removed, and that again is being done laparoscopically. Gynecological diseases, they really have impact on daily life and long-term health. So I will tell you two examples. Like Sarah. Sarah has endometriosis, and she is very successful in career, but she found herself battling with pain many a times that caused her to have frequent absenteeism from the work, and it also strains her personal relationship, and it has really pervasive impact on her life. Then we have another patient, Jessica, who has polycystic ovarian disease, and having the struggles of infertility years. She has an emotional toll, which is compounded by her acne, hirsutism, weight gain, and it has affected her mental health also, and her self-esteem. So gynecological diseases, they do have impact on our daily life, and these are only few stories. There are much more than that, and there are many stories about the reproductive health of women. So this is the reason that comprehensive healthcare of the reproductive disorders should not just include the addressing those issues, but mental health as well. Promoting health and wellness. So that's not just you're going to the clinic and having proactive and preventative healthcare. It starts from your home. So it is the cornerstone of the reproductive health. Since we know a lot of disorders, they have the first advice goes the lifestyle changes. So diet should not just be for reducing weight. Diet should include the important vitamins and omega-3 fibers. And we have seen that in PCO and even in endometriosis, we talked that it has impact, and it can modify the disease. Then exercise, what exercises should be done? So everyone should have moderate intensity aerobic activity, at least 30 minutes a day, and in the most of the days, or 5 days a week. So when I say moderate intensity aerobic activity, that means when you're doing exercise, you should be able to talk. You should not be able to sing. So if you're singing, you're not doing enough. If you're not talking, it means you're overdoing it. And then mental health, again, we cannot emphasize much, but it is really should be the part of, especially gynecologists should understand that how much women needs this care. Then there should be community activities like local health clubs, especially with certain diseases, like there could be an endometriosis club, and there should be community centers, and there could be community health talks, and all online forums also provide these services. And educational forums can be in a lot of ways. What we are doing right now is an educational forum by Girl Power X Talk. So these kind of things should be promoted and should be attended. So these all small, consistent actions, they can translate, they can bring the significant change over time. So now, importance of regular screening. What screenings are available with us is pap smear, HPV, and mammography, and they're widely available, and they have real impact on preventing cervical cancer and the breast cancer. Their role in early detection is there. I will tell you some statistics about that. In cervical cancer, preventing disease 70%, it has decreased the cervical cancer from happening. And for breast cancer, the 5-year survival has increased more than 90% by detecting breast cancer. So screening schedules are available for cervical and breast cancer, but we should be, because these guidelines also keep changing. So we should be updated in the guideline. Doctor should be updated, and even patient should know, because she has to turn up in the to the hospital for having these screens. Recently, the breast cancer guideline has been changed. So we should know what guidelines are being practiced, at least with the regular visits with our doctors. So cervical cancer screening is from 21 to 29, pap test only every 3 years. I normally don't recommend 21, I recommend 25 to 29, because some of the colleges, they say that if you detect disease at the less than 25 years, no need to treat that disease, because young women throw off the disease themselves. So I recommend from 25 to 29, pap a test has to be done triannually. And then from age 30 to 65, you can continue the same pap test triannually, or if you have HPV available, then it can be every 5 years, which is a preferred approach. And even if you have just HPV testing available, it can be done every 5 years. So over age of 65, if you've been regular in the screening and everything has been normal, you can stop having the screen. But if you have history of cervical precancer, then you have to continue screening at least 20 years after the diagnosis of abnormality. Breast cancer screening guidelines are a lot, and there are a lot of institute. I specially picked American Cancer Society guideline because I felt they might be over diagnosing, but there was less chance of having the diagnosis later in disease. So what they say, 40 to 44 years, you can do screening if you wish to, but actually it starts from 45 to 54 mammogram every year, and after 55 it should be every 2 year or yearly. So since we are talking about the increased life expectancy, so they're saying that if you are expected to live at least more than 10 years, you should continue doing it. And if somebody is high risk, like BRCA gene positive, or the mother has a breast cancer, they should start earlier screening, and they can even go for MRI rather than just having mammograms. So empowering women is transformational. So how we will do it? It is by education and awareness, and how we can do this education by the community engagement, by workshops, by having support networks. And what we are doing right now, also we are empowering women. We are trying to give the information. We also conduct, I have a website also. I'll be giving the QR code at the end. We, in our hospital and in most of the hospitals everywhere, there are workshops, seminars, like we have a parent craft classes for pregnant couples, and we also do community health talks, inviting, like we are inviting polycystic ovarian disease girls to have more information, how to modify diet and lifestyle. So, and every woman should know some expert, and they need some expert to turn to whenever they have some question. They can go to that expert, and that should be better face-to-face consult, and there should be help resources available if they have some question, and that should not be Google, that should be a proper trusted health resource. So let's recap what we did. So we talked about the reproductive health. We talked about the different stages of women reproductive life, and we then discussed the common conditions like endometriosis, PCO, fibroid, and ovarian cyst. And we talked about screening. We talked about proactive health care and empowering women. So I will encourage all of you to have regular health checks and maintain healthy living. So I would love to have questions, and these are my QR codes. It's my website, and then there's a YouTube. I love to explain things, and TikTok also, and Instagram also, but they're more of the fun thing, honestly. Yeah. So, yeah. I would love to have question now. Forum is open for the questions. Yeah. I can stop screening how. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for such an insightful session. And we have questions. One is from Mukesh, one is from
Yeah.
me. And yes, like Maria mentioned, we just love fun things, TikTok, Instagram.
Yeah.
So if you're there, yeah, surely we would love to follow you there as well. So we have a question from Mahesh. He wants to know that what will be your advice for the girls having PCOS and not PCOD, but they get mistreated and demotivated about their fertility by the family members and their partner?
Okay. PCOD and PCOS is same, but PCO sonographic appearance, that is ultrasound, that is different. Yeah. So this if somebody has ultrasound appearance, and discouragement is really, it should be, it has a lot of emotional toll already because of their weight gain and because of their hirsutism and acne, and then there are so many challenges already for them for self-fertility. But honestly, I have a lot of women, they come pregnant to me and they say that, doctor, I was PCO before getting pregnant. And I have to tell them that no, like if you were PCO, then you were not, it's hard to be pregnant. So, a lot of time. And one thing, less than 16 years of age, you cannot diagnose polycystic ovarian disease. It's by guideline. If somebody less than 16 years of age, they will have ultrasound appearance of polycystic ovary, and they can have irregular periods, because first 3 years of starting periods, people have this irregular periods and sonographic appearance. So it's by recommendation. But yes, if you see the sign, the girl is getting obese, you see she's into junk food and things, you can tell her that still you're not PCO, but you may end up PCO if you don't take care of your self. So you have to do the healthy. I have a very young girl, she's very less than 16. I told her mom in the beginning that no, you're not PCO. But once I started seeing things that her symptoms, so I told her that you may end up PCO. I told her, since your lifelong journey is with the PCO, you have to understand diet very importantly. And I'm not talking about the fad diet like keto, paleo, and plant-based and all those. We have to understand diet by a very. I can recommend a book actually on that. There's a book out there, Gene Eating by Giles Yeo. This person is a obesity geneticist in Cambridge. He doesn't support any diet. I would say the food industry and medicine in some places and the pharma industry is a bit corrupt. This person, I didn't find anything which should hint to that. He talks about the less processed food. He tells you the mechanism. So especially PCO in young age, they must understand food works. There's a Netflix series also, What We Eat, but I would say that's a corrupt one because that person is just supporting plant-based diet. And when you do try to make plant taste like a meat, you have to add a lot of bad stuff. So either take meat or don't take meat, or take plant, but don't make meat out of plant. Don't make sausage out of diet and understanding that where a proper person has changed into his own interest, because we are what we eat wonderful person. I his podcast, he used to talk everything super scientific till the point he started talking about the plant-based diet. So it felt like that now he's supporting his personal goals. So we have to understand diet, very important, and we, the whole family, should support rather than somebody discouraging. It's a whole family thing. And when PCO happens, it's in the genes. So it's not that so whole person has to change his diet. The whole dining table should change. Yeah, I think Mahesh
Thank you
got the
so much,
answer.
Doctor. Yeah, and also, as Tina mentioned, we would love to know the name of the book if you can share in the
Gene
chat with
eating.
us.
It's a gene eating. I will write it. It's actually in my podcast, in a video. I made one in Hindi and one in English, and I actually try to explain. But you can listen Giles himself. He works in Cambridge. He did BBC programs for weight loss, and he went to every possible person who has done any diet in US. He interviewed them and he put everyone in chapter by chapter, and he explained what was wrong. And since he's not supporting anything, it looks like he doesn't have personal goals. But there was another podcast which was by Michael Greger. It's a very famous podcast. He's US based. Till the point he talked about plant based diet. So then I felt, no, I mean, this is the point. I will I have to listen to him with discretion, because he talked about one research: eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a pauper, and dinner like a pauper, and lunch like a prince. So this was true. I mean, he talked about research, he gave numbers, he gave statistics. So there, and a lot of researches, he talked about the circadian rhythm, he talk about the central clock opened by sunlight, peripheral clock opened by feeding behavior. Here it's all researches till the point he become plant-based. And plant-based, not talking about just vegetarian or something. He's saying to convert the plant into meat. So in that process, you add a lot of bad stuff into the diet.
Sure. Thank you
Please.
so much, Doctor. And last question. It's like I have a question because I have seen the elder women in my household. They find it very uncomfortable to discuss about their menopausal symptoms or their stages. So, like, how can we identify as young people and we can help them?
Actually, we really have to foster a safe space, and we should be open, because we were not open as children. When we had menarche, when we have periods. So even those discussions are not happening. So we really have to, because there are some issues which has to be addressed, like their bone health, it get compromised, and their cardiac arrest risk becomes equal to the man. So it could be one-to-one, and it could be just open thing, like open discussion. And it depends on those people also, what they like. Do they like one-to-one opening up? Some people are really good with and community health talks, like there could be some things arranged. Recently I asked my marketing team to make a community health talk, and I even suggested that let's do it outside somewhere, like a book club. Like, we invite people in our home for book club. So there could be such things, like let's do we don't have that trend. Actually, book club very, very in these days. Everybody just doing the book clubs, or they're part of some book club. But why not having a community health talk by deciding certain topic, and maybe they will find the women of their same age, same problems. Maybe this will be a bit hard, but maybe it will make them break that shell and come out and talk that I did that. Because I think these things are infectious. When they happen, people just open up.
Right. Thank you so much. We have two more questions, doctor. So one is by Adyasha, and she wants to know what will be your advice to someone who was diagnosed with PCOD and through medications the periods were brought to control. So, like, what comes after that?
If it's hormone, then it's not control. But at least it stops the ovary to make the bad hormones. But diet is the most important thing. And I was just listening, the American College has a recommendation for apple cider vinegar, 15 ml every day. I still have to put more research, and I'll be putting in my video somewhere. So, but that those things also coming up, inositol. So, one hormone, then you don't know what is the state, because you're getting period, just the withdrawal bleeding from the hormone. You don't know your ovarian function. You're controlling your uterine bleed through the hormone, but ovary is still on the side. Yes, by hormone, maybe you stop the cycle of the ovary, because in ovary, whatever is happening and bringing the bad hormones which are causing acne and hirsutism, you stop that one. But still, you didn't do the much for the disease. So there's much more than that with the PCO. This girl, even yesterday, she came and I was explaining to her, like, in my diet, I will tell you, there's another book, You Are 10% Human. So You Are 10% Human tells us about that 10% human. I wrote it there. It's written by a biologist, and she says that you are just 10% of your body is human, and other 90% are bacteria. So there's a new theory also coming that these bacteria determine our disease. So whatever we ate, and we didn't eat for those bacteria, it will make that bacteria will be angry from us, and they can make us unhealthy. And it's true, because your 26 feet of gut, if you took something very fast like juice, it will be absorbed in earlier in the gut, and it will not go to that 90% of the bacteria. So I would say that for the diet, it's not just the less diet or less calories. It's more than that, like less processed food. So I recommend, on I like all our ancestral grains like hull barley and amaranth or whole oats. Oats were not there in our ancestral, but hull barley is chilke wala jaw. So we underestimate that, we go for the refined stuff, but that's really a good stuff, because it's so unprocessed and it can reach to those end of the gut and these things. So we have to understand diet for PCO, but hormones, yes, but that's a very small solution. Like, this will shut off the cycle in the ovary, but it will be like ovary going into vacation, not working. So because ovary was working bad and it was bringing the bad hormones, but the moment she'll be off hormone, it will be back. So it's not the solution.
Thank you so much, doctor. And we have one more question coming up after the one I'm going to ask now. So the question is by Tina. She wants to know, what diet will you recommend for PCOS? And one should stick to just veg or non-veg, or there should be a balance between them?
I will not say veg or non-veg, because I know people who have been vegetarian for centuries, for generation, they have a special mutation. So even if they don't take meat, they have no deficiencies. But the people who suddenly become vegetarian, they don't have those mutations to cope, just not having the meat. Or so that is not the question. The question is which form, which time, how, and if you read this book of Giles, you will understand. Even I have a video on YouTube that is around 50 minutes. I also try to pick every good point from Michael Greger, Giles Yo, and I put everything there just to have. And you can have the Giles Yo videos also. He's holding one gut. Somebody stitched that gut for him, and he explains very well that you know your in your intestine is a second brain. So one brain is there, one is in intestine. So but if your food is not going through the whole gut, that brain has neurotransmitters, chemical mediators, hormones which go to the brain and bring out the best signal to make you not disease. If you took juice, it is absorbed in the first feet of the gut, and there is nothing for processing. So taking less processed food, like that is my message, like less processed. So your processor in your kitchen, your knife, your stove, less they are used, your gut will be used more. Like rather taking a celery stick in the soup, which becomes 30 calories, it's better to take chopped celery, which is only 6 calories. So rather taking a steak, rather taking a mince meat, it's better to take a steak. So try to understand, like I will tell you one research, like they said that sweet corn, when it is used like that, you don't digest it because it is all calories are attached to the cellulose and your body cannot digest cellulose. But once you make flour and tortilla, then this all is available, bioavailable. We don't want that. We want food to go, but in the less bioavailable form. So if you understand this concept and the timing of the day, you will lose weight.
Thank you so much, Doctor. We have one more question, and it's from Uratile. She wants to know, what advice do you have for young girls who have bad period pains and they don't want to take any painkillers or any injections every month, as it is a lot of, side effects are involved with it. So what is your advice?
Honestly, we do recommend pain relief medications because there are no side effects. But at some point, if it continues, they should have at least ultrasound done that nothing else is happening, because endometriosis can also be happening in the people. I have a very young girl, she's just 22, and she has this endometriosis. And upon asking, we knew that her mother also had endometriosis. So painful periods, in the past we used to say they are good sign because they are ovulatory cycles, but later on we just knew that endometriosis also can be presenting that way. So we do recommend analgesia, honestly, and there is no harm. I mean, it's official. There is no harm in pain relief medications. It was an old wives' tale, in the past people used to say, but it's not true. It's just a myth.
Right. Thank you so much, Doctor. Anybody else would like to shoot up with any questions? All right. Thank you so much, Doctor. I would love to extend my heartfelt thanks to you for this insightful session. And, all these clear explanations and these thoughtful approaches and advices, they provide a really crystal clear understanding on understanding all these, symptoms and how we can deal with them, what can be the preventive measures. So if there will be any more questions, I'm going to share it on the email.
Would love to. And it was real pleasure, honestly, like we feel also good to, and your audience was really interactive.
Thank you so much. And apart from this, I'll be just putting on email if there are any further questions by anybody else. I'm going to put them on the email and would love to share the resources with everyone which you shared with us right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for a successful participation, and the session was really amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.